All right, friends, welcome. It is week 7 lecture. Oh my gosh, I spelled lecture incorrectly. Lecture 2. My bad on that. It is week 7, lecture 2. And we are almost done, friends. We have almost made it. We have some fun. Oh my gosh. Done day. I just can't spell today. We've almost completed it. Today is a fun one. We're going to start. We're really going to go through just some fun stuff on the platform and looking at kind of everything that we can and do for authorization, for authentication, what that looks like, how we can do that. It's something that I think is actually pretty important. So I'm actually going to take a little bit of time. I want to make sure you guys really understand what we're doing instead of just like whipping through it in these next 2 days. So what I anticipate is we will actually be for the next couple classes. That's just what to expect. Of course, I just put it there. Next couple classes, we're going to go through this. I actually anticipate fully it'll take us almost 3 classes. And it's again because today I just really want to introduce a couple different options, a couple different things that you can do. We're going to use bcrypt for one thing, but there's quite a bit of stuff that we can do. Cool. Before we jump in and get started and actually coding, because it is a lot of just coding today, we got some discussion questions due Sunday, not done day. So make sure you do those and they are ready. You do have a core assignment of authors, so please make sure that you do that. Do not forget about it. And I do owe some people some belt exam retake codes. Thank you guys. Sorry again for the miscommunication. I was under the impression some exams were going to get graded yesterday that alas did not. And so that was just a miscommunication. I said one thing, they said the other, and I thought one thing and they thought the other. So it was nobody's fault, just a miscommunication. I mean, I guess I'll take blame, but miscommunication on that. So everybody at this moment who has given an exam, I have graded and I've sent you either an email saying, hey, I don't have this yet, or something went wrong or something went weird, which nobody really has because I've already talked to all those people. And then, or I sent you your actual exam. You should be able to see that on the platform here fairly soon. If you don't already see that, I did I did update that, but if you don't, usually it can take up to 24 hours. It should be instantaneous, but it can take up to 24 hours. But for all of you guys, I mean, I didn't have anybody fail, which is really, really impressive, guys. So way to go. So everybody that did take it, they passed, which is except one. I think I maybe had one that had like a weird situation, but it's not that they failed. It just was a weird opening situation. So great job. Really, really, really want to give you guys kudos. Lots of black belts. So great job. Lots of orange belts that had black belt functionality. So even better. I'm really proud of you guys for challenging yourselves. Hopefully it wasn't as scary. And it was very, very doable. Because that's the whole point, right? Is not to like, I don't know, trick you guys or anything. We just want to make sure that you know the information, you understand it, and you can move forward. And then you can build on top of it. That's what we're going to do. And that's where I think these next couple classes are really going to come in handy. We're going to talk about some backend stuff. We're going to build some backend stuff, make sure that we can hash our passwords, talk kind of in depth on that. Just so that way you guys are aware and know some of the different opportunities or options and why those are important, because I think they are a really important thing to have. So we're going to talk about that today. And we're going to talk about auth versus so authentication versus authorization and what those can do. We'll talk about that. We're going to talk about bcrypt. That's going to be our password hasher. And really what that's going to do is allow us to make our data or not really data, but more so our passwords just more secure, which is really, really, really going to be important. There is some built-in middleware that we have access to that we will be able to utilize some Mongoose middleware. And so we're going to actually add on to our models today and build in some of that. So that way we can have some different aspects there. And like I said, we're going to really begin our login and reg process. It is a lot of new material. And so I want to take it as slow as possible. Like I said, and we'll look at the calendar right now. I'm not super stressed about getting stuff done. Because really we've talked about everything we need. All of this is just extra kind of icing on the cake. So we're going to talk about back end, and I think we're going to continue back end here because we won't finish it today. Continue back end because yeah, I was kind of going through it prior and just we would be way too rushed, and I don't feel like I could talk about the different options and different opportunities of what you could use or see. So we're gonna take it slow, do that, and then we'll probably build in our front end on this guy right here, because again, all of these are just kind of up in the air. So that's what we're gonna plan on doing. That's these next couple of weeks. As a reminder, everything or your last chance to do an exam is on Tuesday. That's the last chance to open it. Again, you still have 24 hours. So even if you opened it at 11:58 on Tuesday night, you would still have all day Wednesday until 11:58 Wednesday in order to complete the exam. So, really the last day, as you can tell, end of day, Wednesday is the last day, and that's midnight. That's 11:59 p.m. PST. That's what this end of day is, not like 5 p.m. That is the last time that you can submit any discussion questions for this specific week. Because again, week 7 must be done during week 7, and then week 8, and then any assignments that are still due in order to get you above the 90%, you still need to do that. And again, please make sure you remind yourself that you do have a core assignment this week. It's kind of a unique stack. Most of them don't have one after the exam. This one does, and it's called authors. So yeah, if you haven't taken your exam yet, that's okay. But you're kind of running out of time. Just as a reminder, you get up to 3 opportunities to take the exam. What that doesn't mean, though, is that if you are taking your first one and you started on Tuesday and Wednesday, I come and I say, hey, unfortunately, you did not pass. That does not mean you still have 3 other opportunities or 2 other opportunities to take the exam. You get up to 3 retakes until Tuesday. If you wait and then Tuesday night you start your first retake, that's all you get. So it's not a guaranteed 3. You get up to 3 as long as kind of like a coupon, right? Like the coupon expires this day. So just as a reminder there. Any questions on that? For my chat. Cool. Something we did talk about that I just think would be good to note is an office hour. I should have recorded it, and I'm sorry that I did not. We talked about really what to expect these next couple weeks or what to expect next stack. We went over the kind of stack calendar. Again, I didn't record it. So if you're really interested, I can go through it again. But one thing I would say is really start thinking and preparing on what can you do to prepare yourself. My encouragement would be that you guys are very close to graduating, right? You're 5 weeks out, unless you're taking another stack after this, then it's, you kind of have some time. But if you are moving on to projects and algorithms, you are 5 weeks out of graduating, 5.5. So my encouragement is don't wait to start sending resumes. Start your resume process. Just put Coding Dojo. You're going to graduate, I don't know, April of 2023, right? Because that's true. You're going to graduate at the end of April, just like people do whenever they are, going to graduate next year from college. They put that on there so that way people can see it. But start that process now. One tool I would really just encourage you guys to utilize, we talked about this, is HackerRank. There is an aspect of whiteboarding in most interviews, not all of them. And you can look at different companies that don't do it's called whiteboarding. So if you Google like companies that don't whiteboard, I think there's a roaming list out there. And if you're like, I really don't want to do that, or that stresses me out, you can only apply for those companies. But a lot of companies will ask you to whiteboard, except unless it's like a startup, then they might ask very basic stuff. But HackerRank's a great tool. A lot of companies use it. I've had a lot of interviews that they basically send to me a HackerRank test just to see if I pass before I move on to the next one. So they might do that to you. So getting used to, even if you don't learn a whole bunch of algorithms, getting used to how a question is prepared, that's a really important thing. If you go to HackerRank, you can create and sign up. There's a developer and or company one. Just sign up for a developer. It's super free. So you don't have to do anything. You can kind of tailor what you want to learn. If you want to go to algorithms, again, where I would suggest you start is to come here and then start just looking at these and saying, cool, What does this do? Okay, this one, it's asking me to complete a function to compute the sum of two integers. Again, getting just even familiar with complete the function, solve me first to compute the sum of two integers. Asking yourself, what is that asking for? Right? What is it wanting me to do? And then you can do that. We solved this during class, but you can do it in any language. So if you wanted to do it in like a JavaScript, you can. If you wanted to do it in, I don't know, if you have some other thing that you want to do it in, you totally can. So please make sure that you guys are really kind of just starting to think through some of this stuff. Cool. Great. That's one tool. Awesome. Any questions on anything before I jump in and we get started with today's class? Okay. We're going to be pretty heavy here, and I want to sit and talk, and we're going to talk a little bit more theory today. We are going to code some. We're going to code quite a bit still. But we're going to talk for the next maybe 15 minutes on authorization versus authentication, how we're going to, and I'm going to go through, there's a couple different things that I'm going to go through first, and then we'll go and we will build it. Some things I'm going to hit on today, some things I'm going to hit on tomorrow, but we'll move forward there. Cool. So this is on the platform. This is called MERN auth. This is right after the socket IO. So if you're looking at like this guy, it's going to be right here. So if you were like on advanced MERN and then socket IO, then there's MERN auth. This is where we're going to be living for the next couple of days. And so if you were to, it kind of goes this way. So it's going to be right there. And this is where we're going to start really kind of learning and understanding authentication versus authorization, right? And these are two different things, right? Authentication and authorization. Now it is confusing because you might have heard of auth, right? OAuth, or there's a bunch of different companies that use the word auth in there. So you're like, oh, is this authentication, authorization? Oftentimes it's both. But there are some kind of key differences in what they can do, right? And so from like a definition standpoint, is authentication is really authenticating that the user who's logging in is who they claim to be, right? It is like you're going to a concert and you have your ticket and it has your name on it. And then what they're going to do is they're going to have you pull out your driver's license and or some sort of identification and say, is the name on this driver's license or passport the same as the name on the ticket? That is authenticating, yes, this user is the user that has this picture and this passport and or ID is the same user, has the same name as what is on your ticket, right? And so it is done usually by the way it's done and the way we authenticate things is we're going to have our user, and you guys have done this a million times, right? Even subconsciously, where you go and you register, you do some sort of email, you do some sort of password, it goes in some database, cool, you're good to go. Then when you go and you try to log in, what we're going to give typically is an email and some sort of password, right? And so what happens is on the back end, it's going to take this email. It's going to say, cool, find me the user who is associated with this email. Great. And it's going to get this user. Then it's going to say, does this user's password match the password that the user who's trying to log in just put into this form to log in? And if it doesn't match, it's going to say, cool, nope, this doesn't work. Or if it does match, we're going to say, okay, great. You're allowed to continue to your dashboard. You're allowed to continue to whatever you need. So that's us authenticating, yes, the user who is logging in provided the correct information. They gave us the correct email and they gave us the password that is associated to that email. Great, we're good to go. They can move forward. Any questions on authentication? Cool. Now, authorization is different, right? It is not as concerned with the process of logging in, but after being logged in, what does the user have access to? If we go back to our ticket idea, authentication is, does the ticket match the identification provided. What the authorization is what seat and or section and or type of ticket does this user have? Do they have general admission? Does it, so therefore maybe they're able to access like the pit at a concert, right? Sort of kind of standing room only. Do they have access to VIP, right? Can they get past and go certain places that other people can't? Same sort of thing, right? So what are they authorized to do relative to us? It's going to be a lot of like what I can do to a certain user, right? If I am that user, then I am authorized to make changes on my behalf, right? I can update my profile picture. I can update my name. I can update where I ate dinner tonight, right? I am authorized to do that. But I can't go into Chris's profile and update his profile picture. I can't go into Robert's profile and update where Robert ate dinner tonight, right? I'm not authorized to do that. Only Robert can do that. Now, there is the other side where you can have an admin authorization, sort of like God user, overall super user stuff that is authorized to handle anybody and everything, right? They can change anybody's anything. That's where like your IT person, if you forget a password, they can go in, they can send you that like in the cloud. If one of my people has to, lost their password or can't remember it, I can go in because I'm authorized as a sort of admin of AWS. I can go in and I can say, okay, I want to reset this password, send them an email, and it's going to prompt them to do a password. But other, coworkers cannot do that because they're not admin. They're not authorized. So authorization is, what am I allowed to do? What am I allowed to see? What am I allowed to know? Right? Or change. Authentication is the user who they say they are. Are there any questions on that? Just put a 1 in the chat if this is all making sense. And we got a smaller class today. Perfect. Cool. Now, one thing I want to note is here it's talking about storing in a database. In practice, we compare a hashed version, both the submitted and stored passes for additional security. If you guys have already taken Python or Python and Java, or if you've already taken of those, then you understand what a hash is. If you don't, I think it's called a security sites. I think that's what it's called. Yeah. So let's come here and we're going to look at bcrypt. I think it's encrypt. Brute force, print numbers, hashing. Hashing methods. Can't remember where to go, but there is a portion on bcrypt that basically what we're doing, and I guess we can do it here, is we never want to save a password just as plain text, right? Right now, all we have and all we've ever done is save certain things as plain text, whether it's a name or an email or, whatever that is. We've done that. And we want, we've just sort of saved it and that's fine. We never, ever, 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 ever want to save a password as plain text. What we're actually going to do is we are going to what we call hash. So I want to come back here. I want to see if there's not a search. Oh my goodness. I know it's an encrypt. I just can't remember where bcrypt is. It has a good breakdown of what it is. It's all cybersecurity stuff. Okay. Okay. So here's how it works. So we're going to use a tool called bcrypt. I don't know why I couldn't find it. It is an encrypt. I have no idea why. So what this does is we are going to use a password hasher, and there's a couple different ones that you're going to want to use. Really, there's kind of two main ones. SHA-256 is one. That one's really popular, and also so is bcrypt. Now, what these do is these take your password, right? And it hashes it, meaning that it sort of makes a cipher. It makes a different code that equals what your password is, but it obviously doesn't show. If my word is password, my hash is going to be like this. Like if I were to say password and I say determine, this portion right here is what my portion of my password. Now, what this is doing is it's taking this password and it's converting it to something that only bcrypt understands. Only bcrypt understands. It adds a couple different things. It adds this $2A, that is bcrypt, right? 06, this is how many rounds we want to do. So basically how long we want it to be, or how many certain things that we want to hash. And, this is like a speed perspective, right? And so how large we want it to be from a data side, how important and how secure this needs to be. Obviously, maximum security is great, but there is a give and go on how many characters are you starting to store? How long is this going to take to hash it and then decrypt it back, just to make sure if a user's logging in and out, we have to go see that hash. We have to grab it and say, does this match? Does this make sense? Then we can add these things called salt. Now, this is where it's really popular. And just talking, I guess I kind of want to talk also about this is MD5 and SHA-1 produce what we call a hash signature. So something similar, right? They get some sort of hash. Now, this is probably getting way too in the weeds, but I think it's good for you to know. There's these things called rainbow tables. And what this is basically there's a lot of computing power that goes in, and there's a lot of money to be made for people who can crack passwords, right? And there are these things called rainbow tables that basically when MD5, you never use MD5, like never use MD5 or SHA-1. Because what these do is they produce a hash for password. And once that's cracked, it goes into this rainbow table. And so what will happen is if somebody steals a bunch of data, and maybe they steal from LinkedIn, let's say, because I just listened to a podcast on somebody who did exactly this. What they can do is they have all of these users, and all these users have information in, like where their password is. What they can do is if they have these rainbow tables, what rainbow tables do is they give the hash and the password associated with it. So in this case, password, right? And so what'll happen is if they steal your information or your user's information, they can go and basically check and say, is that hash already in a rainbow table? And if it is, they can say, okay, that hash is associated with the password of password. So now they have your email and they have your decrypted password because they know your hash. And then all of a sudden they can steal your information, because oftentimes, unfortunately, people use the same password for everything, right? So if they have it for your LinkedIn, they might have it for your bank account. They might have it for your car. They might have it for whatever. And maybe they can find even more information from a social security standpoint, and they can apply for stuff, right? So there's a whole bunch of things, a lot of money to be made by being able to crack and take passwords. And so that's where bcrypt comes in. It is a very, very powerful hash generator. And the reason it's so powerful is because it's so slow. It's because it's so slow. And that sounds kind of counterintuitive. But the reason it's slow, and then there's another reason as well, is when it's slow, it takes so much computing power to try to crack it that it actually doesn't even make computational sense. It would cost more money for them to even crack one than it would that they would make. The second thing is that bcrypt actually doesn't use the same thing. So here we see that this is like NTUJ, if I were to delete this and like refresh, and I say password, and I determine, you can see it's something that's now totally different. And so this idea of being able to have a rainbow table that this hash equals one password is eliminated, because now it constantly changes it, So this is a way that we can encrypt and keep our data safe. So that way, even if our database were to get hacked and they were to get our users' information, it's much more difficult for them to do anything with it and our users be affected by it than if we were to obviously save them in plain text, but B, if we use something like MD5 or SHA-1. Last thing is we add salt. Salt is just like random characters. So it's just like a random string. And so what that really allows is even more complexity, because they don't know, well, where does it start? Did you have, and you can change your salt as well. So like, do you have 10 characters of salt? Do you have 20 characters of salt? Do you have 5 characters of salt? So now all of a sudden they're like, is this where my actual hash starts? Is this where my hash starts? Is this where my hash, like it, they don't know. And so then therefore it keeps that safe. Okay. The other one also is SHA-256. And so, yeah. So the slowness is highlighted by this easy-to instance. So here we are. So there are some other ones, but you can see that in this, MD5 was able to get 380 million words compared to Bcrypt was able to get 25,000. Right. So it's like just the difference here is insane from it being really, really encrypted or really, really slow to operate. Cool. Any questions on that? Does that make sense? Was that interesting at all? Okay. So those are the 3 sort of things that we're going to focus on, or really we're going to focus on just now, how do we take that information and how do we add it in and change it? So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to this guy. Cool. Lecture 2 in class. I'm going to mkcd server. In that, I'm going to do mkdir. We're going to have routes, controllers, config models. We're going to make just a user model. I'm also going to touch. So I'm creating a new file for server.js. And now let's jump in and do some of that. Oh, I also need to npm init-y. Cool. So I've made this. Now I'm going to still use some of the same tools. I'm going to say npm install. I'm going to use Mongoose still. We're going to do cores because this is a full stack application. We're still using Express. Then I need Bcrypt. I need validator. let me check my other pip in my package JSON, just to make sure I'm not missing anything. See, we've got cores, Express, Bcrypt, validator. We will need .env. I'm not going to do that today, but yeah, we're going to need .env. We're going to need JSON. This is what we're going to do tomorrow, but JSON web token. We're going to need cookie parser. Yep. Bcrypt. I think that's it. Cool. So let's download all this stuff. And I'll put this in the chat if you guys were curious. But really, Bcrypt and validator are all we're going to use for today. Cool. So now that we've done that, let's come in here and let's go ahead and set some stuff up. I've got a lot of this copy and pasted. So I'm just going to use that. So I'm going to say, just to speed up time so we can actually go through the code and not go through things that we have already gone through. Mongoose.config.js. Now, one thing I do want to point out, guys, is when I was building this out today, it is important to note that GitHub Copilot is awesome, but it gave me so many errors today that it was making me want to lose my mind. So though it is a good tool, please always check, because I just trusted it, and I made all of my like controller, my models, my mongoose. I made everything, and then nothing worked. And it took me literally like 45 minutes to debug. So test often. So we got to make sure that we do that. Cool. So here, as always, this is nothing you've never seen. We're bringing in mongoose. We're connecting to our database. I've got a database called reg login DB. And then here, this is normal. We've done this before. And then let's go ahead and set up our server.js before we do anything else. And here we're going to say const express. We're going to then require express. I'm going to have my app equals express. I've got my port. I'm going to bring in cores. I'm not using it yet, but I am going to bring it in. I need to, before I do that, I need to do my require. I need to bring in my config file, right? Make sure that this is connected. Then I need to app.use cores. And in order for me to make post requests, which is going to be important because we're going to do that today, I need to bring in this information. We will bring in some routes. So we're going to have a user.routes.js. So we'll bring that in. And then lastly, I just need it listening, right? App.listen on this port. Cool. Oops. Great. We have this information. We're good to go. Before I do that, I'm going to try to learn from my mistake. I'm not going to require this yet because it hasn't A, been made, but B, I just want to make sure, can this connect? Nodemon server.js. Cool. My error was my config file had the wrong, this guy. It had localhost in there, and I was trying to figure out why my post request was not working. Then I realized it's supposed to say listening and established a connection to the database, and it wasn't doing that, which then told me, oh, I need to go into my connection file, i.e. my config, and try to figure that out. Cool. So now that this works, we're good to go. We can keep building. So let's go ahead. Where should we start? Should we start in our models? Let's actually start in our models. So I'm going to bring in a model because this is really where we're going to hit kind of all the juicy stuff today. So let's get rid of that. We don't need that. We don't need that for right now. In here, I'm going to say model or user, sorry, user.model.js. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to first bring in const mongoose. Got to always bring in mongoose equals require mongoose. Now, because we're going to use bcrypt and we're going to use this new tool, I'm going to bring that in. So I'm going to const bcrypt. I also spelled bcrypt wrong, and it automatically said require, and then I forgot the R. And so then that was incorrect. Again, Copilot didn't check it, whatever. And then we're also going to use this new tool called Validator. Now it shows you on the platform a different way to validate your email. But I also, which uses regex, which is awesome. What all regex is basically saying is, cool, can you use like a letter and number? Then it's just checking and saying, does the value submitted match a pattern? In this case, it could be letter, number, anything, kind of whatever. Plus, then there's an @ symbol. Then you've got another combination, right? Then you've got another combination here. And this is your, .com, whatever, .org, .io, all of that. And so all this is doing is this is validating and saying, hey, we're using this tool called regex. Can we do the same thing here? So you can use regex. There's lots of good stuff. I mean, especially ChatGPT is great, like pretty goated for regex right now. But I want to show you another tool that we can use so that way you have both. So that way you guys can see that there's other ways to do it. And this is what our instructor Caden had found this tool. So I love showing it off. So we're going to do this const, and this is us being able to validate our email. So there's a tool, there's a whole bunch of them. It's going to be called is email. And this is going to come from our validator. So if we Google npm validator, I'll put this in the chat for you. Yep. There's a whole bunch of different things that we can do. So I'll put this in there to validate. Oh, Jang slightly flexing on us.
Sorry, I was talking to Chris and I accidentally forgot to
All
change
good, man.
that thing.
Letting the
My
people
bad.
know that you got a black belt. We love it. It's all right. Cool. So we're going to use this validator. There's a function within this, or a method that's going to be called is email. So we're going to be able to use that. Where is it? Is Ethereum address. Is email. Cool. So this is what we're going to use, right? And it's going to allow us to check and make sure, in the same way that we could use regex to say, is this an actual proper email? We can use this built-in function that's called is email. So we're going to use that and we're going to bring that in. Great. So that's everything we're going to bring in for our new model. Now let's go ahead and create our schema, and it's going to be very similar to what we have. Or we're going to have a first name. We're going to have a type string, very normal. We are going to make it required. And I did have some questions from the exam. This is what is these user created errors. Like we could have this error that says, cupcake and unicorn, right? That is what could be passed in. If we didn't have something like that, if we just had it as true, then it by default will have a specific error. And so on the exam, when it was like, hey, did you change the errors, or is it just the error that came back from Mongoose? This is what it was talking about. So basically, if you had this line, you're good to go. Cool. And then we're going to have a minimum length. Perfect. That is good to go. Let's do a last name. We'll do the same thing. And then we're going to have an email, which is going to be important. Now, we are going to make it required. We can make it unique. This is something we haven't talked about, but basically, we don't want to save multiple users with the same email. So this won't save it. This is a backend validation, making sure, yes, this is unique. I can also, wow, that's crazy that it said this is new. It's kind of nuts. So I could do something like this, or in the same way, I could say something like this guy, and then say email already exists, right? So that way we know this is our user created validation there. And then now we're going to use this validate. So we are using our validator, right? We're passing in is email. And so it's going to run that method from our validator, that package that we installed, and it's going to validate, is this a proper email or not? Great. And then we're going to need our password. It's going to be type string, required. It is true, minimum length. Cool. Now, one thing you can note, and that's very popular to note, is that you can also use regex for passwords. So if you wanted, like, hey, it must have one uppercase, one lowercase, special character, your firstborn child, whatever, because regex is wild. You can do that. So please note that. We're also going to have our timestamps. Timestamps is going to be true. And then we need our, I think it's parentheses. Nope, curly bracket, then parentheses. Perfect. Cool. I got an issue. Do I have one too many? Oh, yep. There we go. Cool. So this is normal. We have seen this. The new thing is this validate, right? This is new. That's all we've had. Now we also have our const user equals mongoose.model user, right? And then we module.exports equals user. Cool. So this is normal. Now there's two things that we've done, or I guess really three things that we need to add here. And this is probably where we'll kind of the end of what we'll have, and we'll test it, make sure that this does work. Maybe we'll get there. Yeah, we'll get there. Cool. So there's three things we need to add to our model, right? First off, we are using bcrypt. We want to make sure that we encrypt and hash our password. We've already used this validator, but one thing that we can do is, first off, Well, yeah, cool. So first off, we've said, okay, this must be unique and let's validate this. Great. Now, one thing that we do need to do is build in some middleware. Middleware to check to see if password matches confirm password. Now, this is just for registering, right? But oftentimes you've got this password and a confirmed password. That's really important. You should do that because if you don't, then the user doesn't know what their password is. If they accidentally fat finger it, that's really what that's for, though it's annoying, just to make sure. So you shouldn't, I do it all the time, but you should never copy and paste. If you do the password, if you type it in, then you copy and put it as confirmed password, you shouldn't do that. Because if you have an error, you're going to copy into both. Or if you use a password manager, you just copy and paste. That's the only way, but you should really not ever do that. But first, we need to make sure that our password matches our confirmed password. Now, we haven't done that yet. We haven't really built that in. We haven't built the form or anything. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to have a field of password and a field of confirmed password, because in theory, if this works correctly, they're just going to house the same information, right? And so that's where we can actually create what we call a virtual attribute within our model that allows us to compare the two for that specific instance upon creation. And then after, it doesn't save it and it doesn't take up any extra space within our database. Now, this is some Mongoose middleware. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to say user schema. Now, what I'm going to say is I'm going to say virtual, and I'm going to call it confirm password. This is the name of my virtual attribute. What I then am going to do is say dot get this underscore confirm password. So this is basically saying, let's create this value here. And then this is my getter. And then I'm going to set its value equal to whatever is being passed in, right? So whatever is coming from my form. Again, this isn't going to be saved within my database. Chris, I think you also did to everyone.
My bad.
No, you're good, man. This isn't going to be saved within my database, but this is creating a virtual attribute so that we can check. And that's what's going to be really important, is we want to make sure that we check and validate. Now, one thing to note is this validate is different than the validator function that we're doing. This is the middleware. But what we can do is we can say user schema dot pre. So before you save this, before you do anything, I need you to validate, and then it takes in a function. It's going to validate if this dot password, so the password of this instance of my user, does not equal this, meaning they are different things, right? They are inherently different. I need to invalidate the confirm password. I run this next, and we'll talk about that in a second. And that's it. So what I'm doing is I'm saying user schema. Again, I'm using this built-in middleware from Mongoose to validate, and it knows, okay, I'm trying to validate some information because this is this is before we sort of save it, before we do anything. We're going to validate, takes in this, or it has this function that takes in this function of next. And that's a really popular thing. And really it's just as it stacks in on what it's supposed to do from a like JavaScript side, the way it stacks in and kind of has it's like a hence Stack Overflow if you have too many things going on. But basically it's the order in which things are going. It is saying, cool, once this is done, go on to the next thing. That's what this next is doing. And this is really popular within the middleware. It's almost in all of them, or obviously not in all of them because we don't have it here, but in a lot of what we're going to do, you're going to have this next. And then basically it's saying, cool, if this is all good to go, then go on to the next thing. We're checking if the password being passed in matches this new virtual attribute of confirmed password. And if it doesn't, then if they don't match, then I want to invalidate the attribute of confirmed password. And then here's my error message. Password must match confirmed password. Cool. Any questions on that?
Well, I have a question, but it's just a little further up. If you scroll all the way up to the top of your code, yeah. So in your email validator or email validate, is validator, like if you were to set your own regex, is that gonna work with how you have it set currently, or can you not run validator? I know you named it validator. I guess
So this is the package that we brought in. Remember, whenever there's an npm package called validator. And so this is the package that we brought in. Validator package has a method called isEmail that we're passing through here.
Okay. I tried doing log and reg before the exam, and then I had to stop for some reason. But I was running into an issue with that, so I'll just show you after class. It'll be
Yeah.
easier that way. All right, thank you.
So if you did it with the regex, this is the way. So you still have this validate, and then the validator that we're passing in is our regex. In this case, it's inferred because we just passed this guy in. This is the validator. Instead of the regex, this is what I'm saying. This is what is validating if this is true or not. This method specifically.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Cool. So we're able to validate if our confirm password and password matches. We're able to create this virtual attribute called confirm password. Now, the last thing we need to do is we need to use our middleware to actually hash our password before we actually save it. So what we're going to do is we're going to say user schema. So we're going to say user schema.pre. Again, this is before saving. Now we save. So saving this information. Again, we take in this function that takes in this next function. We're going to use our bcrypt because remember we brought it in up there. So it's bcrypt.hash. This .hash does a few things. It has a salt rounds. Again, remember that extra string that we have. We can set that equal to 10. Cool. And it has a bunch of different parameters that we can pass in. So the data to be encrypted, the first one, is this part right here. So this is the password we're wanting to hash. Then it's got our salt or rounds. So how, basically how long do we want it to be or how many rounds, specific rounds to use it for. And then it returns our promise. Cool. Because it returns a promise, we have a .then that we take that hash and we say this password equals that hash. So we are now saving the information and saying, cool, this was, if we, let's say we said our password was password. Now, when we save it, we want it to actually equal this hash. And we'll see whenever we log in, whenever we get there in the next couple of days, that we will have to dehash, basically. We'll have to run it through bcrypt again in order for us to know, and we will never know. Like if there's ever a website that somebody can tell you your password, that should never happen. Once it gets hashed, the company should never, because it doesn't understand bcrypt, right? It's not like I can just go in and see how bcrypt works, or else then people could just obviously unhash a password. And so once it's hashed, right? I should never be able to know what that is in plain text, ever. We will use a tool to dehash or basically run it through and say, here's our password. Here's the hash. How bcrypt works, I have zero idea. People way smarter than me built it. And it will compare the two and then say, okay, yep, this is legit. These are the same thing, right? And so what we're doing is we're rechanging and we're saying, instead of having it in plain text, that hash that we just created with 10 rounds, let's go ahead and set it equal to that, because that's what it returns, right? This is our promise. So once this happens, it gives us this guy. Cool. We're saying our password now equals that. Go ahead and run the next thing. And then now we have now set up our model to where if we were to save a user or create a user, their password would be hashed. Any questions on this?
So the next is just stopping things from running asynchronously, or like, so it'll always hit this checkpoint and then,
Yeah, I believe so. I believe it's got to do this. And then it says, okay, now move on to the next thing. I
okay.
believe so, Mike. Yeah. Cool. Now I want to try to build out our controller. We got 8 minutes. I think we can do it in the next 8-10 minutes. Might go 2 minutes over, but that way we can actually see what this looks like in a database. So let's go to my controller and I'm going to say user.controller.js. Perfect. Now I'm going to say const user equals. I need to require models.user.model. So I'm going in, I'm grabbing that model. I'm gonna say module exports. Perfect. I'm gonna create a register method, create a register function that I can then do a few things. Now, we can, because we're going to be using a lot of different things when it comes to just as like this would be normal, right? This is a normal thing that we've done. But because we're going to be using a ton of different things, we're going to have stuff with tokens and with cookies and with checking and a whole, checking our emails and doing a whole bunch of stuff. Instead, we can actually have this run asynchronously to where instead of doing it this way, I'm going to have a try catch in this, and then I'll just put it my catch here. Perfect. So I'm going to have a try catch. And what I first want to do is before a user can register or do anything like that. Ooh, I don't like the way this looks. Sorry, it's stressing me out. Okay. No, didn't like it. Okay. Before I do anything, what I want to do is I want to make sure on our front end, or sorry, on our back end, we've said, okay, our email needs to be unique, right? But before I do anything, I want to go ahead and like, before I try to go and I hash and I do sort of anything, and then it hits this error of saying a user, cannot save user because email's not unique. What I can do is actually just check and say, is this already in there? So I can say const potential user equals, and then I'm going to say await user dot find one, where I'm going to not delete, just one, where I am going to then pass in the email and the request dot body dot email, right? So from the form, from my request that's coming in, I'm going to say, hey, go and find one in my database that matches this email, that's email matches whatever my user just put in. Right? Then I can say if potential user. Now, what that's telling me is there's already a user with an email in there. So if I have this, oh, I do. Sorry. Thank you. I do need async. Thanks, Chris. If if there's already a user in there, then what I want to do is I can just return a status 400 that says, hey, sorry, dude, already a user in there, right? Else, well, what I can do is I can say const new user, await, I'm not going to use session. Cool, const new user. I'm going to await user.create. I'm taking in my request and my body, and we are good to go. Right? I've got this res JSON that says success, and then I actually am giving back my new user. My catch is going to take in my error. And then I'm just going to console.log the error first and foremost, and then I'm going to give it back the 400 with an error. I'm actually going to return that. Return res status 400 JSON error. Cool. I am curly brackets is off. Here. There to there. there to there, there to there. What are you expecting? Okay, don't know which one that was, but alas, here we are. Okay. Cool. So we've got this information, we've got this register, right? Where we can register a user. We're exporting that. We're all good to go. Let's just go ahead and create my route real fast. I'm just going to say user.routes, user.routes.js. I'm going to say my const user controller. User controller. I don't need, yep. I'm going to bring that in. And then lastly, I'm going to say module.export apps. I'm just going to take in app.post. I'm going to say API register controller user. I don't want to add in these other things because I don't have that yet. Cool. So I'm able to just say register user controller. And I'm calling register from here in my controller. So this should work. So let's go test it. Let me get my server up and running. It is still working, so we're still crushing it. So I have got, I've got sort of this all set up where I have API slash, let's go make sure my model, API slash register. So it's not users. I'm gonna actually add in API slash users slash register. Just because we're going to be handling our user, and that's what we've done this entire time. Cool. So I have this localhost 8000 API users register. It's post request. Now my model has a few things. Oops, sorry. My model, I need a first name, a last name, an email, a password. And because I have this virtual attribute, I also need to pass in a confirm password. Same sort of thing from our form. So here we're going to have a first name, a last name, an email, a password, a confirm password. And so let's do this. I've got Cody Calhoun. That's my middle name. Cody Calhoun, c@c.com. I got a password of 1234567 and 1234567. So now if I send this, I get a 404 not found. Cannot post API slash users slash register. So let's go debug. My user routes. I've got post API slash users slash register is my user controller dot register. In my user controller, I'm not getting this. Let's go debug. So I'm looking right here. Here's, I guess this is an important thing to note. Here's how I'm going to debug this. I'm getting this 404 not found, meaning that if it would have been an error within my controller, I've got status 400 here, right? So that's not it. So let's go make sure. I forgot my routes. That was not on purpose, but I forgot these, right? So it doesn't know. So that's why that's good for us to debug and say, well, okay, that's why I was confused. So it's saying, hey, this route's not found. I don't know what this information is. And so that allows us to debug. Cool. So now if I send, cool. So we get this message success. We're able to create this user in here, but now you can see my password went from being 1234567 to now our hashed password. And so this is our password moving forward. We will never know that it's 1234567. This is all we have to work with. And so this is our new hashed password. Great. So that's worked. Now, if I were to say will here, because we have this validator issue, or sorry, not this validator issue, but this potential user where we're saying, hey, if this already exists, if there's already an email in there that matches, which we now know there is, right? Then we should give a response of 400 and say email already exists. So in theory, if this is working correctly, if I try to submit this, we're going to get an error that says email already exists. And we do. right? Email already exists. Cool. Now, tomorrow, what we're going to do is we are going to continue to build this out. Now we're going to look at, we don't just want to create, we're going to need to do a few things in order for us to persistently know what is our user authorized in. We're going to add in a web token. We're going to add in a cookie, right? In order for us to know and track what our user's doing or where they're going, or when they go somewhere, we can understand who is trying to get to this page / do they have access. So that's what we're going to continue to build out. And then what we'll do on Tuesday is, so we'll finish the back end tomorrow. And then on Tuesday, what we'll do is we will go and we will start doing our front end. So I'm going to call this, I'm just going to say off front end, and we will have that fully built out to where we can then pass front end. We can pass that information, create a form, and then, you know, actually log in and then validate that all of this works. Perfect. Any questions on this? Any questions on anything?
For the validator, can you chain validations? Like is email is string or something like that?
That's a great question. I'm not sure because,
Or would it even like need that?
well, it would already say that it has to be type string, right?
Uh-huh.
So if it already knows that, so if it isn't, well, it's going to make it no matter what you put in, even if you just put in a bunch of numbers, it's going to infer that it's a type string. I don't know that you can daisy chain them. I don't know. It's a great question.
Or I guess would you just use like regex in that case if
Yeah,
you wanted
yeah.
like multiple?
Yeah, I would say if you have a couple different things, then that's where you could use regex. Because this is just returning back true. Well, let's ask our let's off real fast. Ask our overlord, i.e. ChatGPT. Methods, the npm validator package. Yes, you can. Let's see. This is what it says. So it looks like you would have to do that stuff ahead of time before running the
Yeah, save it
is-
as a separate
is
function.
email. Yeah, that's what it's
Mhm.
looking like.
That's cool.
Yeah. Interesting. The more you know. Great question, Michael. Cool. Any other questions, friends? All right. That's all I've got. We will continue with our back end tomorrow. Stop the recording.